Good day. As we go into episode 3 of factorisation, we're going to continue into the grouping of terms, which we sort of touched on in the last episode, where your common factor was a common bracket. So what's going to happen here is that we don't have a bracket to start off with, but we're going to generate a common bracket in each expression. So if you have a look at what I've written down here, I've actually written down the same expression twice. And that's because I want to show you that grouping can be done in different ways and still get the correct answer, as long as you group the correct terms together. So the easiest form of grouping is to group the first two and then group the second two. But we have to make sure that in doing that grouping, we're going to get the same bracket in each case. So if I look at the first two, the common factor there would be 3, and I'd be left with a plus x. And if I look at the second two, I've got a common factor of b, and it looks like a minus x, but if you remember some rules about this, you'll see that it is going to become a plus x. So I'm going to, in this case, group the first and second and the third and fourth. So let's see how that's going to work out. Taking out my common factor of 3, I'll be left with a plus x. And then remember, when you're taking out a common factor from two terms and the first term in the group is negative, you must take out a negative. And the common factor was b, so I'm taking out negative b. And then negative divided by negative is going to give me positive a. And negative divided by negative is going to give me positive x. So I do have the same brackets now in my two separate terms. I'm taking out the common bracket. Now it's looking just like episode 2. That's kind of where episode 2 started. And then what do I have left over from the first term? 3, and from the second term, minus b. And that is the answer for that in factorized form. So let's look at the same thing now, but not group first and second, third and fourth. So let's look at other options. If I went first and third, then I would say, okay, I've got a common a, and second and fourth, I've got a common x. So that also looks like a possibility. So I'm going to do exactly the same expression, but using a different form of grouping. So looking at first and third, as I said, we've got a common factor of a, and I'm left with 3 minus b. And then looking at second and fourth terms, I've got a common x, and I'm left with 3 minus b. So in this case, the common bracket is 3 minus b, and I'm left with a plus x. So if we look at those two answers, they might look a little bit different, but if you look carefully, in both cases, the bracket a plus x is being multiplied by the bracket 3 minus b. And if we think back to what I mentioned in episode 2 about the commutative property, it doesn't matter if you multiply two things around this way or that way, you're going to get the same answer. So these two answers do have the same meaning. Let's have a look now at another example that's got 4 terms. And wherever possible, we try to do first and second, third and fourth. So if we look here, we'd be able to take out a common factor of a squared. There the common factor isn't as obvious. I'll get to that as we work through it. So there is no common factor with the coefficients, but there is definitely with the variables. And remember, when you're taking out a common factor from a power, the common factor, the highest common factor will be the power with the lowest exponent, so it's going to be a squared. Then from this term, I'm left with 2a. And if you want to check back that you've done this correctly, a squared times 2a is going to give me 2. And remember, when you're saying a squared times a to the 1, you're adding the exponents, so it will be a cubed. And then I'm left from this term, after having taken out a squared, I'm left with 3. Again, remember, if you're grouping two terms and the first one is negative, take out a negative. These two, 6 doesn't divide exactly into 9, but what times table do they both belong to? The 3 times table, so I can take out a 3, and then 6 divided by 3 is 2a, and then positive divided by negative is negative. Whenever you take out a negative term, be careful about this sign inside the brackets. And 9 divided by 3 is 3. So I have got two terms with the same bracket. I take out the common bracket, and from the first term I'm left with a squared, and from the second term I'm left with negative 3. Right, for those of you who would like a challenge, let's have a look at an expression that's got 6 terms. And on top of having 6 terms, it's also not that obvious how to do the grouping. So before you start your grouping, especially when there are more terms like this, it's a good idea to just do a little bit of brainstorming first. So for instance, if I tried to do first and second term, I'd say, okay, I can take out a common 2x. Then I'd be left with x plus y. Then I test what's going to happen if I take these two, group these two. I would take out a common xz, and then I'd be left with 1 plus z, which isn't the same as that bracket. So you have to do a bit of brainstorming first, and I'm not going to bore you with trying all the options. I'm going to take you to the option that does work. It does sometimes take a bit of time, so we're going to end up grouping the second one, the second last, and the last one, and then the first one, the third one, and the fourth one. So I'm doing groups of 3 now. So let's have a look at this grouping. So I'm needing to look at this term, and this term. So if I look at them carefully, the only thing that's common to all of them is the y. And when I've taken out a common factor of y, here I'm going to be left with 2x. There I'm going to be left with plus z. And there I'm going to be left with plus z squared. Now remember that z and z squared, even though they're the same variable, because they've got different exponents, they are not like terms, so they need to remain separate like that. Now I'm going to look at my second grouping, which I've shown underneath here. My first term is positive, so I know I'll be taking out a positive common factor. Looking carefully at the 3 terms, the only thing that's common is the x. Taking x out of my first term, I'm left with 2x. X out of my second term, I'm left with z. And x out of my third term, I'm left with z squared. So I have managed to generate 2 brackets that are the same. Because it was a grouping of 6 terms and I was grouping 3 at a time, I've ended up with 3 terms in the brackets, but the brackets are identical. So I take out the common bracket. And what am I left with from my first term? Y. And my second term, plus x. So if you enjoy a challenge, look for some more examples that have 6 terms and try to work out the correct grouping so that you get 2 identical brackets. If you don't get identical brackets, then you haven't grouped in the correct way and you need to try a different option.